Shalom and welcome to the Valley of Decision. This video is for the playlist Where's Jacob, and we're going to look at the true descendants of the ancient Hebrews. Now, in a video that I did yesterday for the marathon and fundraiser around Publish the Name, I touched briefly on this topic, and I said that I would start this series, and so this is the series. Now, what we're looking at is the European American Protestant or Gentile claim that they are the descendants of the ancient Hebrews. And basically, their claim is that they are the house of Israel, and they refute the claim of the Ashkenazim, or the Jewish converts, and they refute the claim of the quote-unquote black Hebrew Israelites. And I'm basing this video on what prompted me was watching a video by a southern white Protestant who was basically saying what I just mentioned, that the Anglo-Saxon Protestants, who are the descendants of the British and Irish and Scotch immigrants, that they are the house of Israel, and that the black Hebrew Israelites are not, and that the Jewish people are not. And basically he based his evidence, to support his claim and to refute the claim of the other two parties on verse 68 from chapter 28 in the book of Deuteronomy. And that was pretty much it. He said a few other things that made absolutely... They didn't make any sense. Like at one point he said, the Bible says that the Hebrews would be called great. Well, who's called great? Great Britain. I mean, just things like that were just so out there, but he isn't the only one, and so I'm not basing this just on his video. There are others, but that was finally the one that I just finally decided I'm going to do this video series. So basically what he was saying in his video and what others have said is that the descendants of those British and Scotch and Irish and sometimes some parts of France, that those indentured servants who came over here, that they entered into labor contracts, so they were not sold. And the last part of Deuteronomy chapter 28 verse 68 says, and you shall be, and no man shall buy you. And so meaning that refers to them, and that they came over on ships. And what he did was he completely ignored verses 15 through 68, which is the bulk of the punishments or curses that Moses prophesied would happen, and that would overtake the house of Jacob if they entered into the covenant with the Almighty Yahuwah and then began to forsake the covenant. He ignored all those. Now, again, what he said in terms of the claim of the black Hebrew Israelite, he said that the reason blacks cannot make that claim is because as he said, just paraphrasing what he said, well, everybody knows that the blacks were bought and sold in the African slave trade, so it doesn't refer to them because it says no man shall buy you. So that was it. That was how he denied the claim of the black Hebrew Israelites, was that part right there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at this verse, and we're going to break it down. We're going to try to go through this line by line, precept upon precept, and we're going to see if his claim and the claim of other Protestants, European American Gentiles, if it holds up. Now the verse that he referred to, reads on this wise: And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. That was the part that I have highlighted and in blue and underlined. That's the part that he referred to in terms of the descendants of the indentured servants, that they entered into labor contracts. Well, let's look at this entire verse and look at it in context. It was a prophecy made by Moses, who is the lawgiver, and he told the Hebrews, that were in the wilderness waiting for him as he got the commandments. He told them, if you enter into this marriage, if you enter into this covenant and you begin to break the covenant, if you begin to disrespect the Sabbath days, if you begin to disrespect and contaminate the feast days and to make a mockery of everything, you will enter into these punishments. And one of them was verse 68. Now, at the top of it, he says, and there ye shall be sold. Now, shall, that is a declarative statement. That means it's going to happen. It's not, it might happen. Well, it could happen. You know, it maybe, I don't know, you might be looking at that possibility. No, it says, ye shall be sold. It's going to happen. Now, the last part, no man shall buy you. That's where it gets confusing. There is a conflict there. Those two statements in the same prophecy don't make sense. Unless, of course, you have looked at the laws pertaining to bondage, servitude, captivity. Now, it can be found in Leviticus chapter 25. The entire section is 44 through 55. But what we're going to look at is, if you focus right here on, this is verses 44 through, the whole thing is 44 through 55, but if you look at verse 48 through 49, this is the part that speaks of a Hebrew who, in a state of poverty, who sells himself into slavery to the sojourner, that he can redeem himself or buy himself out of slavery, or his uncle or a kinsman can do it. Okay, now if you read through this, I'm going to read, this is, what's on the screen there is verses 48 through 49. But I'm going to read, I'm going to start at verse 50 just to make it clear that the word redeem, what that word is talking about. Verse 50. And he shall reckon with him that bought him from the year that he was sold to him unto the year of Jubilee, and the price of his sale shall be according unto the number of years, according to the time of an hired servant shall it be with him. Okay, so what do we learn from that? We learn, one, if you read through the entire passage, it's very clear that Hebrews could not force slavery upon one another, okay? But that a Hebrew, in a situation that they could not take care of themselves, that they could enter into servitude or bondage of their own free will, okay? And it was generally to a stranger, not to another Hebrew, okay? The other point is that they could redeem themselves. They could buy themselves out of that servitude, or a family member could do it, okay? So redeem is synonymous with bought and buy, which is why I read those scriptures to you. So when you have this information, okay, as to what that means, no man shall buy you, well, then it makes sense. Basically, he was saying the laws that you have been given in terms of how to deal with captivity and bondage and slavery, they're not going to apply to you. No one's going to come up and buy you. No one's going to rescue you out of your servitude, out of your bondage. The only one who's going to do that is Abba Yahuwah. He's the only one. You will be in this condition, either mentally or physically, emotionally or financially, economically, until the return of Yahushua HaMashiach. That is what that refers to. Okay, when you know that, that explains why it doesn't matter how many W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garveys came along, that they could not get us out of this situation. It doesn't matter how many Malcolm X's. It doesn't matter how many Black Panther. It doesn't matter. It was not able to happen. Things improved, situations improved, but it was usually, when you look at it, it was usually for the benefit of the oppressor, okay? Some people say that the situation got worse, that basically what Martin Luther King Jr. and what Malcolm X, what they did was they integrated us into a burning house. Okay, but let's look at another part. He said, sold into Egypt again. Why Egypt? Now, there are some videos that I've seen by several different Ashkenazim in terms of talking about this verse. They all of a sudden start talking about the fall of Jerusalem and the Jews, not the Jewish, but the Jews who were sold into parts of Rome. He didn't say anything about Rome. He said Egypt. Why didn't he say Rome? Why didn't he say Babylon? Why didn't he say Cush or Libya or, Foot? Why didn't he say that? Well, Moses was raised in an Egyptian household, meaning he would be familiar with the customs, with the religious practice, with the symbolism there. So whatever he saw in prophecy of that future, that conditional future that the Hebrew Israelites would find themselves in if they fell under the punishments, prompted him to say Egypt. Well, let's look at what might have prompted him. Okay, how about the Egyptian pyramid on the back of the dollar bill? The currency that is the most widely circulated, that has for decades had the highest exchange rate, that is most known, most popular throughout the world. There are people who recognize this currency as opposed to their own currency. Okay, how about this? This is an obelisk. This is an Egyptian religious symbol that Moses, if he had seen it, he would have recognized it. It is found, it is echoed in the structure of the steeple. Okay, that is found on nearly every place of worship in Christendom. It is also what is situated in Washington, D.C. As much as they want to tell you it's a monument, that is an obelisk. That is an Egyptian symbol. That is what would prompt him to say Egypt again. How about the headgear of the Pope? Okay, the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, who basically legalized slavery from the religious perspective, giving it the church's approval, okay, for not only the United States or the colonies of Great Britain, but for the known world, okay? That would prompt him to say Egypt again. Now, he also said with ships. Now, once you get that connection to these parts that I've just talked about, then it's very obvious that it is talking about the slave ships, the transatlantic slave route. That is the most, deep passage, that is the most horrendous part that is talked about over and over. Just the horrible conditions, being shackled, almost a navel to butt, not being able to move, being forced to lay in your own feces, your own urine, and anyone else's who might have dripped onto you. The sharks that would follow the ships, being let out for only brief periods of time to clean it only when the stench became unbearable for the workers on the ship. Okay, but then if you look at the condition of those immigrants, those Gentile Europeans who came over as indentured servants. They were in contracts that lasted from 3 to 5, sometimes 7, sometimes 10 years, but at the end of a given time, they were free to make financial gain any way they chose. They willingly entered into their contracts. They were able to go anywhere they wanted to. Okay, they chose their own destinations. They could go to the sheep farms in New Zealand, to the wheat farms in Australia, to the timberland in British Columbia, to the rice and tobacco and cotton fields in the United States, or the 13 colonies. They had to choose. And yes, the conditions on those ships were not good, but they were, you can never compare them to the forced, cramped, unsanitary conditions of those African slave ships. You can't do it, okay? Any physical discomfort that those indentured servants felt on those ships was because they could not afford to get better cabin space. The companies that hired them a lot of times would hire the ships that took them, okay? That's the situation that they were in. Now, he said, ye shall be sold. So we're talking human chattel. We're talking human bondage, being sold against your will, being on an auction block, having someone literally grope and fondle you, your genitalia, look at your teeth, feel your muscular. I mean, come on. There's no need to even go into that. Being deemed as property. Okay, so when you break this down, it's very clear what this is talking about, and there was only one people who fit this description. The Hebrew slave trade was the global economy for 400 years, and that is even after the actual buying and selling of captured bodies was stopped. They were able to found industries that are still thriving to this day. There are families that made money that still have that money. There are companies that they founded, they have changed the financial profile, so it's impossible to track their money back to the slave trade, but it is there. It's very obvious that the so-called Black American, the Black Caribbean, okay, the Black Latino, that we are the Hebrews. It is obvious when you look not only at that verse, part 2, part 3, I'm going to look at the other parts of this passage, but it's obvious that it is referring to us. You cannot get around it. The situation that we were in was not only prophesied in Deuteronomy, it was prophesied in Leviticus chapter 26, it's prophesied in parts of Isaiah, it's prophesied in parts of Jeremiah, it's prophesied in parts of Joel, in parts of Amos, in the book of Romans. It is throughout the scriptures as to who it is talking about. Now, I'm doing these videos to talk about these subjects, but also to publish Yahuwah. So at the end of each clip, chances are you're going to see some of the graphics for the postcards, the bumper stickers that I am selling to help publish the name of Yahuwah, the true name of the Almighty Creator. I'm selling them for $1 a piece. You can, with a minimum purchase of 15, maximum purchase of 25, so you can get 25 for $25, or you can get 15 for $15. Just let me know, leave a message in my inbox, let me know which ones you would like to purchase, give me an address as to where I can have the printer send them, and they're yours to help spread the true name of the Almighty and His Son Yahushua HaMashiach. Shalom.